June 21st, 1944. Tokyo, Kasumigaseki District. In a low concrete office buried behind blackout curtains. The air tastes of ink, cigarette smoke, and damp wool uniforms. Rain taps the window panes in thin, nervous rhythms. A ceiling fan turns slowly, pushing warm air across a long table where a stack of papers sits like a loaded pistol. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, Chief of Staff at the Combined Fleet, stands with his cap tucked under one arm. His face is lean, eyes fixed on the top sheet. Across from him sits Admiral Soimu Toyoda, newly appointed Commander-in-Chief Combined Fleet, hands folded, expression controlled in the way men learn when the sea has taken too many friends. The paper is not a battle report. No heroic damage assessments, no torpedo angles. It is a production summary, compiled from intercepted broadcasts, diplomatic whispers, prisoner interrogations, and the cold logic of American industry. One officer reads aloud, voice careful, as if volume might make the numbers more dangerous. New fleet carriers commissioned, escort carriers launched, destroyers, oilers, transports, tank landing ships, aircraft output by month. Each line lands on the table with the weight of a shell impact. Toyoda does not interrupt. He watches the men around him, captains and staff planners with sharp collar points and tired eyes. They are men who grew up on the idea that the Imperial Navy could strike first, strike hard, and force America to negotiate. They were taught that spirit, training, and decisive battle could overcome distance and mass. But mass is sitting right there, in black print. Fukudome clears his throat. Even if we win tactically, he says, the enemy replaces faster than we can repair. It is not a dramatic statement. It is worse. It is practical. Someone slides forward another sheet, this one covered in hand-drawn columns. At the top, the names of American shipyards: Newport News, Bethlehem, Puget Sound, Fall River, places that sound like geography, but behave like machines. Below them, launch dates and hull numbers, a procession, a conveyor belt. A younger staff officer points with a pencil. They commission a carrier group and another follows before we finish training replacement pilots. The word replacement hangs in the room. Japan can replace hulls slowly. It can replace experienced carrier pilots even more slowly. Men who have landed on a heaving deck at night do not grow on trees, and the old training pipeline is strangled by fuel shortages and instructor losses. The best of the old guard burned away over Midway, Santa Cruz, and the long attrition around Guadalcanal. On another sheet, the American carrier names appear like an insult: Essex, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Yorktown again, reborn, Wasp again. The Americans lose one and return with a sister ship wearing the same name, as if they have the power to resurrect steel. Toyoda finally speaks, quietly. So this is their answer to our strategy. They do not argue. They build. A captain near the end of the table shifts in his chair. His knuckles are pale around a teacup he has not raised. If the figures are correct, their output alone decides the war. No one says impossible. Not out loud. That word would sound like treason. Instead, they use safer terms: unfavorable, unsustainable, a widening gap. But every man understands the truth behind the phrasing. On the wall, a map of the Pacific is pinned with red and blue flags. The blue flags creep westward month by month, island by island. Saipan is being fought over right now, thousands of kilometers away, where American naval aviation is closing around Japan like a tightening net. In the map room, you can almost hear distant engines, the throb of carriers that never seem to run out. Fukudome flips to a page showing estimated American carrier strength for the next year. The projection is a staircase that climbs beyond reason. Even if we sink 3, he says, tapping the chart, their yards replace 5. One of the planners, a rear admiral with round glasses, tries to salvage something, Anything, if we can inflict a decisive loss. Perhaps the American public. Toyota looks at him without heat. You're speaking of politics. The enemy is speaking in steel. The rain outside intensifies. A distant siren wails. Not for an air raid, but for a routine drill. The city has learned to practice its fear. On the table, the numbers do not blink. They do not care about courage. They do not care about tradition. They do not care about the sacred aura of battleships or the poetry of a decisive engagement. The men around the table are naval officers, raised on gunnery tables and honor. Yet here, in 1944, they stare at an enemy whose greatest weapon is a schedule. A clerk enters, bows, and places another envelope beside Toyota. New information. More ships. More aircraft. More proof that the American war machine is not slowing down. Not even for a breath. Toyota rests 2 fingers on the envelope, feeling the paper like a pulse. For a moment, the room is silent except for the fan and the rain. Then he gives the order to continue, because that is what officers do when the sea rises and the math turns against them. They keep planning, even while a private understanding forms behind their eyes. Not a belief that they will win. Only a question of how long they can keep Japan afloat while America builds the ocean itself. That evening, June 21st, 1944. Tokyo feels tight and dim. Streetlights are hooded. Windows are crisscrossed with tape. The city smells of wet asphalt and rationed coal. Inside the Navy Ministry, a smaller conference room is lit by a single shaded lamp. The light pools on a map of the Philippines, the Marianas, and the long blue distances between them. Admiral Osami Nagano, Chief of the Naval General Staff, sits at the head of the table. He is older than most of the men around him and carries the weariness of years spent balancing impossible demands. His uniform is immaculate, but his face looks carved by sleepless nights. Beside him, Vice Admiral Takazumi Oka, a senior staff officer, leafs through a folder of intelligence estimates. Across from them sits Admiral Suemu Toyoda, again, summoned from combined fleet discussions into the political heart of the Navy. This is not a room where optimism lives. Here, words are chosen like ammunition. Nagano holds up the production summary that has already traveled through too many hands today. We have confirmed it, he says. The enemy is producing carriers at a rate that outpaces our entire replacement capacity. No one argues. No one laughs. The silence is the argument. Toyoda answers with the bluntness of a commander who must send men to die with a straight face. Then our decisive battle must be decisive in a way we have never achieved. Oke sets down his folder. Even that may not be enough. A lieutenant commander in the corner, brought in to summarize the latest American ship movements, clears his throat. The Americans have multiple task forces rotating, he says. Even damaged ships return quickly. Their logistics are continuous. Oilers keep them at sea. Their carriers operate like a moving factory line. Nagano's eyes narrow at the phrase moving factory line. He looks at the map as if he could see that line drawn across the ocean, a conveyor belt of hulls and planes. His finger traces from Pearl Harbor to Eniwetok, to Saipan, to the Philippines. He does not need to trace farther. He knows where it ends. Japan cannot match that. He says, the words are small, but in this room they are a confession. Toyoda leans forward. We can still strike, he insists. Not because he believes it fully, but because his duty requires it. We have still carriers, still battleships, still the Kido Butai remnants. We can still concentrate. Oke meets his eyes. Concentrate against what, Admiral? Against an enemy who can bring more carriers than we can imagine and replace them while we count our losses. The door is shut. Guards outside keep the corridor empty. This is private talk, the kind that cannot be written in official minutes. In public, the Navy speaks of certain victory, of sacred determination, of inflicting intolerable losses on the enemy. In here, the senior men speak like mechanics diagnosing a failed engine. Nagano taps the paper again. The imbalance is not only ships, it is aircraft, fuel, engines, aluminum, trained airmen. Even if our shipyards work without pause, we cannot create steel and oil out of spirit. One admiral, a man with a thick neck and a voice that once filled parade grounds, tries to push back. The Americans are a democracy, he says. Their will may falter under heavy losses. Nagano does not snap, but his reply is sharp in its calm. Their will is being reinforced by their production. Every launch is a speech. Outside, somewhere in the city, an American bomber is not yet overhead, but everyone in the room can imagine the sound. That sound has become a clock. Toyoda, who has spent years at sea, speaks as if he is back on a bridge looking at a storm front. Then our only hope is to make the ocean itself a battlefield. To strike their carriers, their oilers, their transports. If we cannot stop their yards, we must stop the ships they send. Okay's mouth tightens. And if we fail, no one finishes the sentence. They do not have to. Failure means the war reaches Japan's home waters. Failure means airfields on islands close enough that American fighters can escort bombers to Tokyo. Failure means the Navy becomes a memory of smoke and sinking hulls. Nagano stands slowly. The chair legs rasp against the floor. He looks around at them, one by one, and for a moment the mask of leadership slips. His voice drops. In private, he says, "We must acknowledge this. Industrial power decides this war. Tactics may delay. Courage may give us moments of brilliance, but the enemy has turned the conflict into arithmetic. Arithmetic. The room absorbs the word like poison. Toyoda nods once, almost imperceptibly. Then our duty is to delay, he says, to make every mile cost them blood, to buy time for a political outcome we cannot yet see. Okay looks down at the map. Time does not favor us. A junior officer, trying to be useful, offers another sheet. It is a list of Japanese carrier air groups, their estimated strength, their pilot quality ratings. The numbers are fewer than they should be. The quality has slipped. The best instructors are dead. Fuel rations have shrunk flight hours. New pilots arrive with courage, but not enough deck landings. Toyoda takes the sheet and studies it. His jaw works slightly, as if he's chewing a bitter taste. We will still fight, he says. Nagano answers with the sorrowful certainty of a man who has watched waves grind cliffs into sand. Yes, but we must understand what we are doing. The lamp hums. The rain outside has stopped, leaving the city slick and reflective. In the glass of the map case, the faces of the admirals appear faintly, layered over islands and sea lanes like ghosts already haunting their own plans. They talk late into the night, weighing options that all feel like variations of sacrifice. Commit the fleet at the Philippines. Draw the Americans in. Use land-based aircraft to weaken them. Send submarines ahead. Feed the battle with what fuel and planes remain. Every plan returns to the same wall. America keeps building. When the meeting finally ends, Nagano pauses at the doorway. He looks back once, as if memorizing the room. This is where the Navy admits to itself what it will never admit to the nation. Victory is no longer a matter of skill. It is a matter of whether Japan can endure being outbuilt. It begins for them in memory, in 1943 when the war's tempo changes. April 18th, 1943, south of Bougainville, Solomon Islands. The ocean glitters in hard tropical sun, and the wind carries the smell of aviation fuel. A Japanese search plane drones above the waves, its crew scanning for the faintest sign of American movement. Far to the east, beyond the horizon, American shipyards are turning raw steel into hulls as if the earth itself has been ordered to produce. But out here, the war is a chain of small losses that add up. A destroyer captain watches his wake and thinks of all the times he has escorted transports into contested waters. Each run is a gamble now. American submarines are bolder. American patrol aircraft are more frequent. The Americans do not seem to tire. In Tokyo, Admiral Minechi Koga has replaced the late Isoroku Yamamoto as Commander-in-Chief Combined Fleet. Koga is a careful man, methodical, determined to rebuild what has been broken. Yet his staff reports show the rebuilding is not keeping pace with the breaking. In a briefing room, the admirals study after-action reports from the Solomons. The paper smells of salt and mildew where it has traveled in weather-proof bags. A staff officer points to lines on a chart, showing attrition, aircraft lost in raids, pilots lost in dogfights, planes ditched on the return leg because fuel was short, carriers damaged and sent back to the home islands for repairs that consume months. The Americans, meanwhile, are learning fast. Their carrier groups coordinate more smoothly. Their radar gives them earlier warning. Their anti-aircraft fire is denser. Their fighter direction is more effective. Even when Japan scores hits, the enemy absorbs the damage and returns. The Japanese word for spirit is often spoken, but the men who actually fly and sail know spirit does not patch a ruptured boiler or replace a trained deck crew. October 6th, 1943. Truck Lagoon. The combined fleet's anchorages are busy, but the mood is brittle. Truk is supposed to be an impregnable bastion, a fleet base behind reefs and jungle-covered islands. Yet American reconnaissance planes appear overhead like rude reminders. Every time an engine note is heard in the distance, men look up. In a steel-walled conference cabin aboard a flagship, Koga's staff reviews reports of American carrier production. The intelligence is incomplete, but even fragments are alarming. A captain runs a fingertip along a list of new American hull numbers. They are not slowing down, he says. Another officer, younger and angrier, says what others avoid. They are multiplying. Koga sits with hands clasped, listening. What matters is our ability to destroy them in decisive action, he says. He has to say it. The Navy's doctrine is built on it. But even as he speaks, they all remember Midway. 4 carriers gone in a day. The idea of replacing those losses now feels like trying to refill the ocean with a bucket. A senior air officer, his face still marked by sun and wind, takes a breath. We do not have enough trained carrier pilots, he admits. Even if new carriers arrive, who flies from them? That is the other imbalance, the one not as easily seen in ship counts. A carrier without experienced airmen is a floating target. In late 1943, Japan begins pulling back. It evacuates Guadalcanal months earlier. It shortens lines. It fortifies certain islands and lets others go. Each retreat is explained as strategy, but the admirals understand it as necessity. They are being squeezed by a machine that grows stronger every month. Now, in 1944, those memories sharpen. The production figures are not abstract. They are the reason that, by the time Japan repairs a damaged carrier, the Americans have launched another one. They are the reason that American task forces can rotate, while Japan's ships must be preserved like family heirlooms. In a private office, Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, a senior staff officer and longtime aide to Yamamoto, writes in his diary with a tight, controlled hand. His ink strokes are steady, but his thoughts are heavy. He has watched the Navy go from bold confidence to grim calculation. He is not a man who surrenders easily, yet he has begun to measure the war in grim terms. He recalls how Yamamoto once warned that Japan could run wild for 6 months, perhaps a year, but after that he could not promise success. Those words, once spoken almost casually, now feel like prophecy. Out at sea, Japanese destroyers burn precious fuel to escort convoys carrying troops and supplies to islands that will soon be isolated. Crews stand watch with eyes strained, looking for periscope wakes. They know that the Americans are not only building carriers, they are building submarines too. And those submarines are choking Japan's lifeline. Back in Tokyo, the senior admirals tie these threads together. The ship numbers, the pilot shortages, the fuel rationing, the shrinking perimeter. All of it points to the same reality. America is not just fighting with ships and planes. America is fighting with factories that do not sleep. And Japan's admirals, men raised to believe that a single decisive battle could settle everything, can now see the outline of a different kind of war. A war in which the decisive force is not a battleship broadside, but an endless stream of hulls sliding down ways into the sea. When they speak privately, their tone is no longer about winning outright. It is about how to make losing take longer. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commander of the Mobile Fleet, stands on the bridge with binoculars in hand. He is a carrier admiral in a navy that once defined carrier warfare. His ships still look formidable in photographs. Their decks still stretch long and clean. Their flight crews still snap into motion with practiced precision. But the force beneath him is fragile in ways the steel does not show. Ozawa's carriers have aircraft, yes, but not enough seasoned pilots. The training pipeline has been cut thin. Fuel shortages have stolen flying hours. Men who should have hundreds of landings have dozens. The deck crews work with intense discipline, but they cannot manufacture experience. The plan is bold in the old style. Draw the American carriers toward the Marianas. Use land-based aircraft to help. Strike first, strike hard. Turn the enemy's advantage into a moment of vulnerability. From the bridge, Ozawa can see the faint dots of his own aircraft lifting away, climbing into the sun. They look like insects at first, then become arrows. The men around him are tense, moving with clipped voices and quick glances. A signalman waits by the flags. A radio officer leans toward his set as if willing the ether to speak good news. Hours pass. Then the reports begin to arrive, and the bridge's bright calm turns into something else. American fighters are intercepting far out. Radar gives them warning. They are meeting the Japanese strike groups at altitude. In organized swarms, the Japanese pilots fight bravely. But bravery does not keep a cockpit from being filled with bullets. One by one, the returning waves thin to a trickle. A staff officer reads off the losses, each number feeling like a knife. Planes launched, planes missing, pilots not returning. It is not a battle in the old sense. It feels like a harvest. On the afternoon of June 19th, the sky above Ozawa's fleet fills with American aircraft. They come in tight formations. Their engines make a sound that is deeper, heavier than Japanese engines, a confident roar. The anti-aircraft guns open up, tracers stitching the sky. The deck crews and gunners do everything they can. Bombs slam into the sea and send columns of water higher than the mast. A near miss can buckle plates. A direct hit turns men into smoke. Ozawa watches through binoculars as one of his carriers is struck. Flame blooms. The smoke is thick and black, rolling like a storm cloud. The ship lists slightly, then steadies. Damage control teams racing in. But for every Japanese hit, the Americans seem to have more planes. By nightfall, Ozawa's staff has to say the words no one wants to hear. The enemy's carrier strength remains overwhelming. The Japanese carrier air groups are shattered. The battle has become what American sailors will later joke about as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But on Ozawa's bridge it is not a joke. It is the sound of a generation of pilots dying. The next day, June 20th, the Americans push again. Their carriers launch late strikes at extreme range, a demonstration of logistical confidence. They recover aircraft at dusk with deck lighting and practiced systems. Even their mistakes are backed by depth. Ozawa's own carriers begin to peel away, retreating westward. His staff works the radios, trying to maintain order as the fleet withdraws. The men on deck see the empty spaces where aircraft should be parked. On the bridge, Ozawa lowers his binoculars. His face is still composed, but his eyes carry the strain. He has fought battles before. He has seen ships sink. Yet this battle feels different because it is not only about tactics. It is about a gulf in capacity. An aide brings him a situation report. Enemy carriers still operational. Enemy aircraft losses moderate. Japanese air losses catastrophic. Ozawa does not shout. He does not curse. He simply nods. Once, as if confirming what he already knew from the production figures, from the intelligence briefings, from the endless list of American hulls. In the aftermath, when the fleet reaches safer waters, senior officers gather in cramped rooms smelling of sweat and oil. They speak in subdued tones, sometimes with a bitter edge. One captain says, "We could not reach them. Their fighters were already waiting." Another answers, "They have too many carriers, too many aircraft, too many trained pilots." The words are spoken with the bluntness of men who have watched the future arrive. When reports of the battle reach Tokyo, the Navy Ministry receives them with tight faces. They already suspected the outcome. The production sheets told them what the battle would look like, even before the first plane took off. The battle simply gave the numbers a voice. In private, an admiral says what the official communiques will not. Even if we sink an American carrier, it changes nothing. Another comes, another follows. The Marianas' defeat is not just a military setback, it is a psychological rupture. The old doctrine of decisive battle depended on the idea that the enemy's fleet was a finite thing, that if you struck hard enough, you could break it. Now, Japan's admirals can see that the enemy's fleet is not finite. It is being fed by a continent. It is backed by shipyards that measure output in months rather than years. It is guarded by logistics that keep it moving like a living organism. And Ozawa, standing on a bridge that smells of salt and burned cordite, understands the cruel twist. He did not just face American pilots and ships. He faced American replacement. In a secure room behind a guarded door, the senior naval officers meet again. This time, the tone is different. The Marianas' battle has stripped away the last easy illusions. The perimeter has been punched inward. The Americans are building airfields close enough that Japan's home islands feel less like a sanctuary and more like a target. Admiral Soemu Toyoda sits at the table, joined by Admiral Osami Nagano and several other senior officers, men whose names will never appear in public statements as doubters. A clerk sets down a folder stamped with classification marks. Inside are American production figures updated through mid-1944. The room goes quiet as the pages are turned. New carriers, more escort carriers than Japan can even track properly. Destroyers in numbers that make Japanese escorts feel like a thin picket fence. Oilers and repair ships that keep the American fleet healthy at sea. Transports by the hundreds, each one a promise that the Americans can land armies wherever they choose. A staff officer, voice tight, delivers the summary. Their shipbuilding capacity has increased again. Their aircraft production continues at scale. Their carrier air groups rotate and replenish. Toyoda does not look up right away. He runs a fingertip along a line of figures, as if checking that the ink is real. In his mind, he sees steel sliding down slipways, sees cranes swinging sections into place, sees factories stamping out engines, sees training fields full of new pilots. He sees an ocean filled not with waves, but with hulls. Nagano speaks, low and controlled. We have reached the point where the imbalance decides the war, regardless of tactical outcomes. This is not a speech meant for morale. It is a statement of fact exchanged between men who can no longer afford comforting lies. One rear admiral, known for his aggressive views earlier in the war, exhales through his nose. So even victory in a major battle would not change the strategic outcome. Toyoda finally looks up. His eyes are clear, Not panicked. That is what makes the moment chilling. It would delay, he says. It would not reverse. A silence follows. You can hear the scratch of a pencil as someone makes a note, though no one asks for it. The men in this room are deciding how to fight a war they are privately admitting cannot be won in the conventional sense. Another officer speaks, almost reluctantly. Then we must choose where to spend our strength. We cannot afford waste. The phrase "spend our strength" sounds like money, and in a way it is. Each ship is capital. Each trained pilot is a treasure. Each ton of fuel is a coin that will not be replaced. The Americans, by contrast, seem to mint more coin every day. Nagano gestures toward a different sheet showing Japanese oil stocks and consumption rates. Fuel, he says. If we commit the fleet, we risk using what remains. But if we do not commit, we lose the initiative entirely. Toyota nods once. We must commit, but we must make the enemy pay in a way that buys time. This is where the conversation turns darker. The planned battle in the Philippines, the concept of luring the American carriers in, is no longer described only in tactical terms. It becomes a calculation of sacrifice. One officer says, we can use surface ships as bait. Draw their carriers toward our land-based air. Another adds, we can accept losses if they break the enemy's tempo. The words "accept losses" are spoken as if they refer to material. But everyone around the table knows they mean crews. Sailors, boys barely trained, men who will not come home. In the corner sits Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, an aviator with intense eyes and a face that looks older than his years. He has watched Japanese air power bleed out over the Pacific. He has watched inexperienced pilots take off and never return. He listens as the older admirals discuss battle plans that assume heavy losses. Onishi's jaw tightens. He says quietly, if we cannot match their production, then our attacks must be certain. The staff officer looks at him. Certain how? Onishi does not answer immediately. The room waits, sensing the shift. Certain, Onishi repeats. In their effect, not in their probability. The meaning is grim, and it lands like a weight. It is the kind of thought that appears when conventional methods fail, when bombs and torpedoes, dropped by men who might miss and live, are no longer enough to guarantee damage. Toyota does not endorse it openly here. He does not need to. The idea has already begun to spread in other rooms, in other airfields, among commanders who see the same numbers and draw the same conclusion. Nagano returns to the production sheets. We cannot replace ships, he says. We cannot replace trained airmen, even if we build hulls. We cannot fuel and crew them as before. Another admiral, voice hard, says what has been circling the room all day. Then victory is impossible. The word is finally spoken. Impossible. It does not trigger arrests. It does not cause the ceiling to collapse. It simply hangs in the air, a naked truth. Toyota's expression remains steady. If victory is impossible, he replies, then our objective is to shape the end, to prevent collapse, to protect the homeland as long as we can, to force terms that preserve the nation. It is the closest thing to a strategic pivot the Imperial Navy can admit. Not a plan to conquer. A plan to endure and to hurt the enemy enough that politics might intervene before annihilation. The meeting continues into the afternoon. They talk of Leyte, of the Philippines as the next great test. They talk of using battleships to lure American carriers away, of sacrificing carriers without air groups to draw strikes, of committing everything in one vast gamble. Yet under every sentence, the production numbers hum like an engine. The Americans will keep building. When the session finally breaks, Toyota stands and looks at the map of the Western Pacific. The pins marking American advances are too close now. The islands are no longer distant points. They are stepping stones leading to Japan itself. He speaks softly, more to himself than to anyone else. Steel, he says. and then the next word is barely audible. Endless, Admiral Takeo Kurita stands stiffly, eyes narrowed, listening to reports that come too quickly. American aircraft are coming again. The first wave arrives like a sudden storm. You hear them before you see them, a growing thunder that becomes a roar. Dive bombers peel down, their silhouettes sharp against the sun. Torpedo planes skim low, leaving white scars on the sea. The Japanese anti-aircraft batteries erupt. The sound a constant ripping. Shell casings clatter. Smoke blooms. Men shout range calls. The sky fills with tracers and falling aircraft. Kurita watches the pattern and understands the American method now. They do not need a perfect strike. They can attack in waves, probing, hitting, returning, repeating. Their carriers can keep launching as long as the wind holds and the fuel lines run. One by one, Japanese ships take hits. The super battleship Musashi, pride of the fleet, becomes the focus of relentless attacks. Bombs punch into her decks. Torpedoes hammer her flanks. Damage control teams fight flooding knee-deep, waist-deep, then chest-deep in dark corridors. Men pass ammo and hoses through smoke, faces smeared with oil, eyes red from fumes. The ship slows, lists, corrects, lists again. On Musashi's bridge, officers keep their voices calm, but their hands grip rails hard enough to whiten knuckles. They call out course changes, orders to counter flood, orders to keep firing. The guns continue to speak, gigantic thunderclaps that shake the sea. Yet the enemy aircraft keep coming. By afternoon, Musashi is dying. Her list increases. The ocean climbs her side as if the sea itself is claiming what steel cannot keep. When she finally rolls and sinks, the moment is not cinematic. It is brutal, loud and fast. Men spill into the water amid oil and wreckage. Some scream, some are silent. The wake of her passing leaves a stain that spreads. Kurita absorbs the loss with the blank face of a commander who cannot afford emotion. He knows Musashi is not replaceable, not in months, not in years, not under blockade and bombing and empty fuel tanks. The Americans may lose ships too, but the Japanese know the difference. America replaces, Japan mourns. Kurita turns his force back briefly, then later pushes on through San Bernardino Strait under cover of night. The sea is darker than ink. The stars feel cold. On deck, sailors whisper. The engines thrum. Somewhere ahead, American escort carriers and destroyers guard the invasion fleet off Leyte. October 25th. Dawn. Off Samar. A thin gray light reveals a sight that should not happen. Small American carriers, the kind built quickly and in quantity, are there in front of the Japanese battleships and cruisers. They launch aircraft anyway. Even under attack, they keep launching. Kurita's gunners open fire. Shell splashes rise like buildings. The air shakes. Yet the Americans do not simply run. Destroyers charge into the teeth of battleship guns, laying smoke, firing torpedoes, forcing turns. Aircraft, many of them carrying bombs meant for ground targets, dive in again and again, making up in aggression what they lack in weight. Kurita feels time slipping away. Every minute his force spends chasing these small carriers is a minute the Americans can reorganize. And they always reorganize. They always have another group somewhere. Reports come in. More American aircraft inbound. More smoke. Torpedoes in the water. Confusion in the rain squalls. Kurita makes the decision that will haunt him. He turns away. To the outside world, it will look like hesitation. But inside the Japanese command, it is something else. It is the recognition that even if he destroys what is in front of him, the larger American war machine will continue. The invasion will not stop. The fleet will not vanish. There will be more carriers, more aircraft, more destroyers. As the Japanese forces withdraw, Other parts of the Leyte battle turn into sacrifice. The southern force is shattered in Surigao Strait, caught in a trap of radar-guided fire. Japanese battleships that once symbolized national power are cut down by coordinated American lines. The sea glows with burning fuel. Men abandon ship into water lit orange by flame. In Tokyo, the Navy Ministry receives the Leyte reports with faces that barely move. The numbers they studied in August have become wreckage now. Ships sunk, ships damaged, pilots lost, fuel spent that cannot be replaced. And yet the Americans keep coming. By early 1945, American carrier groups roam near Japan's approaches, striking airfields and shipping. Bombers appear over cities with increasing frequency. Each raid is backed by logistics and replacement. A damaged carrier leaves the line and returns. Another takes its place. A shot-down pilot is replaced by a new one trained in a pipeline that never seems to dry up. Japan's admirals, in their private rooms, say less now. There is less left to argue about. Some cling to hope that a final massive blow might shock America into negotiation. Others focus on the defense of the homeland, on delaying, on making the cost high. But the industrial imbalance is no longer a theory. It is visible in the wake of every American task force and the empty docks of Japan. On an airfield later that year, a line of young pilots stands beside aircraft prepared for one-way missions. Their faces are set, some terrified, some strangely calm. Behind them, older officers watch with hard eyes. They are men who once spoke of decisive battle with carriers and battleships. Now they are spending lives as weapons because they cannot spend steel. Out at sea, American ships continue to arrive in numbers that feel unreal. New hulls, fresh paint, full fuel tanks, flight decks crowded with aircraft. In the end, what the senior Japanese naval officers admitted privately in 1944 becomes the story of the war's final phase. They were not defeated only by American tactics. They were defeated by the fact that America could build the war faster than Japan could survive it.